Good afternoon. Welcome to this meeting of the Northern Planning Committee. I am Councillor Paul Wynne, Chairman of the committee. Some housekeeping. We're not expecting a fire drill today. In the event of the alarm sounding, please leave the building and gather at the front of the building. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Could I also ask you to ensure that your mobile phones are switched off and ensure the volume on your laptop is muted. I would like to explain the purpose of this meeting today. Members will be aware that on October the 31st, 2023, this committee resolved to approve the application for the North West Relief Loan, subject to the completion of the 106 agreements and subject to the conditions to be imposed on the decision notice being brought back to the committee, enabling members to agree at the wording of the conditions. Therefore, would ask members to ensure that they keep any discussion or debate focused on the wording of the conditions. It is recognised that some of the conditions are very technical in nature, and officers have, since the October meeting, liaised with the consultees to make sure that they cover all matters necessary, meeting the legal test of planning conditions. To ensure the members of this committee on all points raised by the public speakers are properly heard, I must advise you that I will not tolerate any disruptive behaviour. This is a meeting held in public, not a public meeting. And if such behaviour takes place and persists, I will adjourn the meeting. Members should ensure that they are present throughout the meeting, as you cannot vote on any item if you have not heard all the debate. Can members and officers introduce themselves each time before they speak, so those listening know who is speaking? I shall now ask members of the committee and officers to introduce themselves. Just before that, can everybody make sure, without touching this bit, get this quite close to them so we can hear clearly on the microphones, please? So, Nigel, can you start off, please?
Yes, Councillor Nigel Hartin from Clun Division, substituting for Councillor Nat Green.
Joyce Sparrow, St Oswald.
Ed Clark, Mason Hill.
Julian Dean, Port Hill.
Jeff Elner, Ellesmere, Urban.
David Evans, representing Craven Army Church Stretton and also a substitute.
Roy Allcroft, Market Drayton East.
Roger Evans, Longdon Division.
David Vasmer, representing Underdale in Shrewsbury.
Thanks.
Vincent Lanamalik.
Officers, please.
Tabitha Lith, Planning and Development Services Manager.
Sorry. Tracy.
Tracy Dark, Assistant Director, Economy and Place.
Mike Davis.
Sorry.
Which way do you want to go around?
Yeah, this way, yeah. Oh, I saw.
Demi Cook, Planning Ecologist.
Matthew Farmer, Public Health, Biodiversity, Emergency Planning Manager.
Gemma Lawley, Developing Highways.
Thank you.
Matthew Clark from Matt Clark Associates, representing Regulatory Services.
Phil Edge from Waterman, Contaminated Land Specialist.
Rob Forsyth from Waterman, looking at flood risk and drainage.
John Bellis, Flood Risk Manager.
Tim Collard, Assistant Director for Legal and Governance.
Christian Hawley, and I'm a barrister.
Miranda Garrard, Head of Legal and Democratic Services.
Thank you very much for that. Far more than we normally have. Okay, item 1, apologies for absence. Gary Biget, substituted by David Evans. Councillor Steve Charmley, substituted by Roy Allcroft. Nat Green, substituted by Nigel Hart. Public questions, there were none. Is there any disclosable pecuniary interests? No? Okay. So, before we go any further, we've done it, yeah, some late items have come in. So, we're going to get these, we're going to ask Tabitha to talk us through them before we start the actual meeting, okay? Tabitha?
Quick question if I can,
Yes,
Chairman.
yes, Roger.
Going through the planning portal, I see there's a comment 14th of February at 15:50, and included in the comment are all those. And I don't know why it is there. One is from Severn Trent, one is from the EA, and then there's another one, 14th of February, yesterday, at 15:59. Whether it's my computer, I'm not sure, but again, it is like that. There is the reference there about some late information which appears, but I just don't know why it is there.
Can I ask if anybody else has had that problem?
Well, yes, it does come up whenever you put them on the planning
Yeah.
portal, Chairman. It does come up a complete series of blank.
Right. Are we covering that now, Tabitha? We are. Have you got anything written down in front of you now?
Sorry?
Have we got anything more in front of you now, Roger? You should have an update sheet somewhere.
They are, Chairman, but why is that on the planning portal appearing like this?
I don't know.
I don't know what's included in it. It may be important to help me make a decision. I don't know.
Yeah, I totally understand, but nobody else has that problem. I'll pass over to Tabitha. Thank you, Tabitha.
As those emails were addressed to me, I can inform you what was in them, Councillor Evans. I'm not quite sure why they've all been blanked out. I think it was perhaps our admin team blanking out email addresses, and I'd sent them a series of emails. But essentially, it was just me asking Severn Trent and the Environment Agency, do they have any further comments on the conditions? I will ask in the meantime that is put on the website in full, but there isn't anything sensitive in there that can't be shared. I'm not quite sure. I think it was somebody just redacted it, the full thing, without asking me the need to redact. So there isn't anything in there that can't be made public. It was just a discussion about the conditions. Do they have any further comments?
Yeah. Yes, yes, Roger.
Chairman, you know what my answer is going to be. We should adjourn until that is public so that it's there. We're here as in a semi-judicial role, and if there's redacted papers, for whatever reason, it's there, and members need to be aware of what's in it. Whether it's relevant or not, it should be there, surely. I'll leave that for legal consultation, but those papers are there on the planning portal for whatever reason. If what is shown there is correct.
Well, we'll just take some advice on that if you don't mind, Roger. It's okay.
Much of this is in the late items, but I will get the full email to you shortly. We'll ask a member of the admin team to print it out now for you, but there is nothing in there that can't be made public. And it was just an admin error.
Could you cover that now, Tabitha? Could you go through it now, possibly? I know it's a time issue.
Yes. Problem is I'm presenting.
What prompt me to vote?
Yeah, can you go and ask Dave to print it? We could do 15 copies because I'm all members.
The EA email and the Severn Trent email.
Yes, yeah. Could
we just
make
have
a
one person at a
suggestion?
time, please?
So the other item that I want to discuss, so whilst Mike's just gone to get the printout for everybody of that email and we'll get it put online in full, there is an update to the final conditions. It's the same as what was published on the website, but there was a colour error, so the red hadn't come through on everything. So the wording is exactly the same, but I've put a copy out for every member to have a look at now. So perhaps whilst we go and get that email printed, you can have a look through this document. But I'll talk you very briefly through what is in here. So it's the update to final conditions. The first set is the requests that were made by Severn Trent. And the conditions 20, 21, 23 and 43, they asked for the words "in consultation with Severn Trent Water and the Environment Agency" to be added. So we've added those as per their request. With regards to condition 54, they wanted to be consulted if there were any contamination that was not previously identified occurred in the Shelton Source Protection Zone. So we've added that clarification in as they've requested. Condition 55, they also asked to be consulted on if any verification report involving remediation work within the Shelton Source Protection Zone is submitted. They've asked to be consulted on that, so we've added that into the condition as per their request. Moving on to page 3. So this is request by regulatory services. There's you can see the amendments in red there. So with the addition of dust, and then 2 further bullet points into that about the assessments. These were missed in an error of merging of 2 documents. So these are more clarifications. The assessment has already been made in the report about these, but it was a mistake on the version that was printed. And the same with condition 32. There's the addition of "that may be clearly audible at the site boundary" was asked to be inserted by the noise team. And on 53, the insertion there within 6 months and any properties eligible for insulation. On condition 60, this was noted by the arboricultural officer to clarify which landscaping we were talking about. So a change was made there to highlight it was connected to condition 14. And the next one is the request by the climate change officer to add in the wording "and location of carbon offsetting or removal activity within Shropshire or neighbouring local authority area, and particular attention should be paid to minimising the release of carbon embodied in the vegetation cleared from the route." Then condition 5 has been amended to ensure that the Section 106 agreement is linked in thoroughly to the planning permission via the condition, and the same with condition 58. We've also had a further discussion with the ecology team, and they have agreed that the condition can be updated to remove the requirement to be in approximately 200 metres of Hencock pool, because there's since been a discussion with Natural England that's agreed there's been 2 fields identified which will be signed up through the Section 106, and the wording of this ensures the Section 106 is tied in correctly to this planning permission and the condition. And the last condition is condition 63, which is an addition to the previous final version. It's the district level licence condition that the ecology officer has requested. It was previously requested, it was just missed off the version that went to print, so it was sorted back, but that is there for in addition today. So I'll allow you time to just read those, but that's a talk through of what the additions are and the amendments to the list that was printed with the report last week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to the, particularly to the link, the Section 106 conditions, it is unusual to do that. So it is belts and braces. So just for members' awareness, we've just added those into the conditions so that, you know, we've covered all eventualities. But it is unusual to do that. Equally, the condition 63, which is around the district level licence, again, where there's other legislation in place, you wouldn't normally have a condition. So it is a belts and braces. It would normally be a note to applicant, actually, but in this case, we've just included it as a condition. So it's just for members' awareness that it's not, you know, onerous that it was missed.
Yeah. Thank you. Tabs, have we got information on the printouts?
I'm just going to pass over the presentation to Mike's laptop so I can go and print this off because Dave isn't at his desk at the moment. So
Are we
I'll
happy
just
with
go
that,
to that.
Roger? So we can have the
I
presentation.
couldn't catch that, Chairman.
So Tabitha's going to go get them printed off. Mike will present, and then we'll have the papers. Then we'll pause so we can go through it. All right?
I do have one question on... Sorry, I do have one question on what Tabitha said, and that is on condition 55. At the top of page 3, in red, it says Environment Agency shall be consulted. The Environment Agency actually said Environment Agency will be consulted. Was there just English that wanted that to be changed or not? Or was there a particular reason from will?
It's in consultation with the Environment Agency.
Well, through you, Chairman, the Environment Agency is saying Environment Agency will be consulted. That's what the Environment Agency have suggested.
This request actually came from Severn Trent, not the Environment Agency.
Okay, yeah, whichever, but in the comment it says that it's there. So whether it's just needed to be changed for English or convenient, I'm not sure.
I think shall is our standard wording, so that's why it's been
Okay.
used as shall. We have suggested that minor wording could be delegated to us should it need to be, if we think there's a need to amend a condition.
Right. Nigel, you indicated.
Just one point for Tabitha, if I could, Chair. On the late representations I see from Severn Trent here, they mentioned that condition 56 failed to request any specific signage around SPZs. And I know that's in the report about WSP's view why they don't agree with Severn Trent. But you say the above is noted and will be given consideration as part of the conditions attached. So I'm assuming from that with as the amended conditions don't include specific signage for the SPZ as requested by Severn Trent, that's not what officers are recommending.
There's a later email actually which I will print off for the committee where we had the discussion between myself and the town planning manager at Severn Trent where we'd been discussing the issues around specifically having source protection zone and highway signage because we've had a discussion with the highways officer and there are concerns about distracting drivers. So there's been a discussion about we could have signage by the SOS phones where it then tells people what's going on, but it could draw attention from other unnecessary attention and perhaps cause a crash unnecessarily by people looking at a sign that's not relevant to drivers generally. It's only if there's an accident it would be relevant. So there's a discussion of that and he was happy to accept that, to leave condition 56 as it is.
Okay, I'm just thinking, so now, so if Mike, if you could... So, Mike, you're going to present now, then we'll get these printed off while Mike's... Is that okay?
Mm.
Unless we get...
I think Tabitha needs a laptop and Mike needs a laptop as well.
Right.
But just...
Okay. Can somebody else go and get them printed? So where are we up to? So we're just going to pause for a minute or two. We'll pause for a minute to go to, if you want to go through this and peruse for a minute or two, while we try and get things sorted out, okay? Thank you. We're live now again. So where were you? Mike to present. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. We are here this afternoon, obviously, to discuss the conditions in relation to North West Relief Road, which previously was considered by the committee at the meeting on the 31st of October 2023. The purpose of this meeting is to discuss and agree conditions in relation to the previous resolution of the members of the committee. So I'm just going to do a brief overview of the actual scheme itself. This is a location plan which shows the route of the North West Relief Road as it is proposed at present.
Mike, can you just bring the mic towards you a bit, please? That's correct.
Yeah, this is the route of North West Relief Road as it is proposed to be built. This is the route that was subject to consultation recently during the application process and is obviously now the subject of this meeting to discuss conditions in relation to that. This is an overview on Google Earth just to show where the actual route is actually going to. And as you'll see, the route starts off in Churncote, travels through Shepherd's Lane, Holyhead Road, then across Berwick Road roundabout, then up to Altman Wood and Hencock as well, then travelling up to Hencock Pool and finishing up at the Ellesmere Road roundabout. This is another route map as well, which just again just reinforces where the road is actually going. And as I say, the purpose of the meeting today is to discuss conditions in relation to the previous resolution. Thank you.
Sorry, Mike. Oh, that done. Okay, sorry. Right, we have some speakers. Yeah. So the presentation. Sorry. The late letters. Right. Okay, Mike. Cheers.
We've also received, since the report was written, we received some late representations, and obviously members will have a copy of that. That's been circulated to members. In terms of those representations, we have comments from Severn Trent Water. We also have a letter from Irwin Mitchell Solicitors. We have a letter from a member of the public. There's also a letter on behalf of Morris Leisure, submitted by League Planning. We also have representations from Better Shrewsbury Transport. And also a further representation from the planning manager at Severn Trent, the comments from the Environment Agency, and also comments from between the council and Severn Trent further, which are all detailed there in relation to the conditions. In terms of our comments on these, I'm just going to briefly run through that and respond to the comments that have been made. In relation to the Irwin Mitchell letter, the LPA is content that the environment statement is robust and points of clarification raised by watermen have been addressed by the applicant to our satisfaction, and we feel we're comfortable now to move forward with conditions. It's considered that a comprehensive suite of conditions have been developed to cover all outstanding matters of concern and to deal with these in an appropriate manner. Turning to the Morris Leisure representations, comments and conditions list was noted along with suggested trigger points, and we've tried to look to incorporate these. There was an issue raised regarding the right-hand bank and being able to deal with an issue there which was outside of the red line. Having discussed this with the applicant, this is a minor error which actually involves 5 square metres of land that's extending slightly beyond the red line boundary. No vegetation removal is proposed in this area, so bank protection is not required in this area as no site clearance is taking place. This will be picked up in the detailed design drawing to discharge condition 28. Turning to the comments from Better Transport for Shrewsbury. The EA's view on the environment statement is precisely that, a view. It's not binding on the local planning authority, which has undertaken due diligence, instructing an independent third-party consultant to fully review the environment statement. It's not usual practice either to name consultees in planning conditions, as ultimately the power to discharge conditions lies with the local planning authority. Although we've taken on board the comments from the EA and Severn Trent in this regard, and now written in, they will be consulted as part of that those conditions. The LPA, it also needs to be remembered that the local planning authority does not police other arms of the council's statutory responsibilities. It's incumbent on the highway authority, the statutory undertaker, to act in a responsible manner, and we would expect that as a public body. Turning to the issue of pre-commencement conditions, this is a fundamental tool of the planning regime and are widely used, so we don't see any issues in terms of the number of pre-commencement conditions which have been put forward.
Right, thank you. Right, we're going to move on to speakers now. We have several speakers. I'm not quite sure where you're going to speak from, actually. I haven't seen... Thank you, Ashley. I just can't see from here. So, the first speaker, Edwin Lomas. Would you like to come forward, please? Local resident. You have 3 minutes. The clock's there. Edward, is that okay?
Thank you.
It'll start when you start speaking, okay?
Okay, make it hard sitting down at the moment. Right, I'm a resident of Shrewsbury and a professional ecologist with over 30 years' experience. This has included ecological work supporting the Black Country Route, Burntwood Bypass, Rugeley Bypass and Pelsall Road Canal Bridge. 3 of these ran adjacent to protected habitat. 2 gained significant awards for environmental protection. From my point of view, I think there's a great deal wrong with the North West Relief Road scheme and the process that has brought us to this point. My own review of the WSP reports and conclusions found good work, poor work, and a worrying number of protected species issues that have simply been ignored. The shortcomings have affected the quality of your planning conditions. As examples, bats have been the subject of several WSP reports. Some surveys did not meet industry standards, and several important factors were not included. The NPPF states that planning authorities must have sufficient information to assess the full impact of a development on a European protected species before granting planning consent. Condition 12 asks for an extensive baseline survey before work starts. If sufficient information had been provided, there would already be a baseline. The NPPF allows for some survey after planning consent to monitor changes, but not to establish a baseline. Your condition impacts on the validity of your October 31st decision. Otters have been identified using the river around Shelton Rough. Although WSP survey work did not meet the published standards that WSP quote in their report. Disturbance by lighting and construction work is known to affect otter movement through their territory and can impact their breeding success. 4 conditions relate to this type of disturbance but make no reference to otters. There is no mention of otters in the conditions at all. Otters are a European protected species. Condition 16 relating to bat roost mitigation is unclear. Are the proposed boxes for crevice resting roosting bats completely additional to the mitigation proposals in SEI Appendix 1.8. These conditions indicate a conflict between the October 31st decision and the Planning Authority's statutory obligations, as in NPPF, in Government Circular 2005/6. Well, I've got a little time. I might add that WSP missed a badger set in the line of the road, and that their badger mitigation proposals, where they cannot put in tunnels, simply don't work. That is based on my direct experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie. So, next speaker, Heather Streetley, like to come forward, please. Well done. Thank you, Ashley. You have 3 minutes. The clock will start when you start speaking.
Hello. I'm a hydrogeologist with 30 years of experience, and I spoke to you on the 31st of October about your duty to protect the Shelton borehole, which supplies Shrewsbury drinking water, which is threatened by the plan to build the North West Road. You decided on that occasion to ignore the concerns of the Environment Agency and press on with approving the application, despite being told that the Highways Department and their consultants had still not done the work that the Environment Agency asked for in their scoping opinion that was provided in 2019. After that meeting, the EA wrote you a letter setting out the inadequacies of the EIA and the fact that the application was not in a state to be determined. However, the Highways Department and LPA were determined to press on and completely ignored the views of a statutory consultee. So, the EA provided some text for conditions, whilst making it absolutely clear that they did not advocate such an approach. The planning officers have now put these conditions before you for approval. I thought I would use my long experience as a hydrogeologist to explain what is actually involved in the work that is now being shunted into conditions. Condition 21 requires a detailed quantitative risk assessment to be carried out. The existing DQRA is a 130-page document full of complex calculations to predict what would happen if there were to be a contaminant spill. By putting such a complex risk assessment into a condition, the planning officers are suggesting that the outcome of these complex calculations will show that the scheme is safe and that the proposed mitigation is okay. You cannot know this outcome in advance. So what would be the mechanism for making changes if the results show that there is a high risk? Is this something that can be safely left to the planning officers to sort out, with no oversight from the planning committee and no visibility from the public, who are clearly concerned about the risk to their water supply? Likewise, Condition 30 requires a Water Framework Directive assessment to be submitted and approved by the LPA and the Environment Agency. The directive is very clear that deterioration of the status of a water body, like the Permian-Triassic aquifer that Shelton uses for its supply, deterioration is not allowable. What if the Water Framework Directive assessment concludes that deterioration will occur? Will the project be cancelled or completely redesigned then? How much more money will be spent before the Highways Department gets to that point? I hope you can see from what I've said how wrong it is for these things to be dealt with in the planning conditions. You should therefore send this back to be properly determined on the basis of complete information. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Well timed. Thank you very much for that. Right, we have Matthew McHugh. Would like to come forward, please. You have 3 minutes also. The clock will start when you start speaking, okay?
Thank you. Chair and members of the committee, I speak on behalf of Maurice Leisure, who objects to this application. Within the 2 latest officer reports, Shropshire Council officers state that the EIA is not comprehensive, robust or fit for purpose. This is based on the applicant's interpretation that it is fit for purpose, but at no point do Shropshire Council officers reinforce or support the view of the applicant or Waterman's in any of their reports. Furthermore, Waterman's views are contradictory. In their detailed EIA review of geology and soils, road drainage and water environment, they state the following. In summary, the road drainage and water environment proposals does not clearly demonstrate that flood risk, water management, water quality and pollution control is being suitably considered in terms of ES assessment, given the design proposals are not wholly complete and or suitably detailed. As such, spatial planning is therefore not clearly and robustly identified, which may notably impact the scheme's design principles. This does not support the view that the EIA is robust, fit for purpose, and can be relied upon to override the Environment Agency's objections to this scheme. On the contrary, Waterman's comments support the Environment Agency's ongoing concerns over the lack of information available about the potential impacts of the development on the water environment. The lack of information available about the potential impacts of this development is consistent throughout the submission. This is reinforced by the 62 conditions requesting further detailed information on phasing, arboriculture and ecology, lighting, drainage, groundwater, noise, carbon assessment, transport modelling, air quality, an emergency response plan, and the financial and legal means which the plan will be delivered. The outstanding detailed information can notably impact the scheme's design principles. These are matters that are fundamental to the acceptability of the project as a whole and should not be addressed by a condition to resolve. They should be addressed in advance of determining this application. The phasing proposed is not appropriate. There should be a comprehensive true condition precedent that restricts any works, as these conditions should be considered as going to the heart of the permission. Fundamentally, the lack of details relating to all matters is a significant concern, which impacts the outcome of the scheme. Should the drinking water environment be polluted for any reason as a result of the scheme in its current form, the financial implications for the Council are far-reaching and irreversible. That is the significance of the decision being made today and why the omitted detailed investigations and design solutions should be presented and approved in advance of a planning approval. Thank you.
Sorry, my mic wasn't on. You have 3 minutes when you start speaking, Mike, okay?
Thank you for listening to me today. I appreciate that you have a very difficult challenge in front of you. If I were a cynical man, I might be tempted to encourage you to go straight ahead and approve these conditions because, frankly, this application is a mess. 63 planning conditions, 40 pre-commencement conditions, shows that the work needed to be done just hasn't been done. Approving these conditions in this state makes the legal challenge so much easier for anyone minded to do so. But I'm not going to do that. Instead, I urge you to send this back for redetermination. And if you're not going to do that, then postpone approval and ask that all the risk assessments and surveys are completed first and removed from the conditions. The committee can only make decisions based on the information in front of you, and it's clear that you were poorly advised on the 31st of October when the officer's report suggested that the EA's views weren't clear. The letter that the EA sent on the 12th of December is absolutely clear what their position is. And if you look back, it's equally clear that the EA's position has been the same as far back as their response to the scoping request in 2019. So their reply in December shouldn't have been a surprise. And what is the EA's position now? Their latest email says it all. They have nothing more to say. Why should they, when their views as a statutory consultee are continually ignored? So a statutory consultee has raised important concerns about the risk to our water supply and hinted at unquantified liability for Shropshire Council if things go wrong. They have said that the EIA you are asked to base your decision on is inadequate / incomplete and not a sound basis for decision. Regulation 3 of the EIA reg says the relevant planning authority must not grant permission unless an EIA has been carried out. In other words, if the EIA is incomplete, you committee must not grant permission. How have we got in this position? The Environment Agency has maintained the same position since 2019, and the Highways Department and their consultants have been content to continually punt the difficult decisions down the line, running up a bill of £25 million in the process, and then landing you with this hospital pass in the expectation that you'll push it through. Can't get agreement on the risk assessment? Oh, just push it in a planning condition. Fail to do the right surveys? Just add it in later and hope they won't show up any problems. Well, today is when the buck needs to stop. It's made clear to you that the application is not in a fit and proper state where it can be signed off, let alone have conditions approved. Pressing forward is to present an open goal to anyone with a mind to put forward a legal challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Right, the Speaker, Alex Grant, would like to come forward, please. You have 3 minutes also, and the clock will start when you start speaking. Thank you.
My name is Alex Grant, and I'm a resident of Shrewsbury. I'm a trustee and honorary secretary of Shropshire Wildlife Trust, on whose behalf I address you today. Thank you for the opportunity to engage with you as you seek to finalise the conditions attached to the planning permission for the North West Relief Road. However, please do not interpret this engagement as indicating any softening of our position with regard to the proposed road to which we remain implacably opposed. One of our principal concerns relates to the potential impacts of the scheme on the area commonly referred to as the Green Wedge during both the construction and post-development phases. This is the sole remaining largely undisturbed corridor in and around Shrewsbury in terms of wildlife and in terms of human access to and enjoyment of nature. The conditions concerning various aspects of environmental management focus largely on amenity and health issues, for example, noise and dust, and these are, of course, important relevant matters. But we would ask that similar considerations are also applied specifically in respect of wildlife in terms both of direct impacts on animals and habitat and in preserving terrestrial and aquatic migratory routes through the affected area. And not just for wildlife, but also in terms of any transient impacts on human visitors. Any adverse impacts due to dust, noise, or air quality which might discourage human enjoyment of the area must run counter to any initiative to promote access to nature and consequently may lead to a potential reduction in well-being in the community. We respectfully request, therefore, that sufficiently robust conditions are attached to protect the Green Wedge from adverse impacts during all stages of the proposed development. Speaking more generally on conditions, and having landed in the past on the wrong side of inadequately drafted conditions, we would urge members to ensure that all timelines are tightly specified and that any submitted schemes are approved only after appropriate expert review. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Alex. Okay, we have one more speaker. Matt Johnson, would you like to come forward, please? No, just to explain to everybody, Matt's got 8 minutes because the speaker's against, so he has more minutes because he's speaking for, okay?
Thank you, Chair. We may not take all 8 minutes, but appreciate that. So, as applicant, the Council remains committed to continuing to work successfully with its key statutory stakeholders, the local planning authority as well, in order to deliver the North West Relief Road. In particular, we note and welcome both the Environment Agency's and Severn Trent Water's most recent correspondence, and we can confirm that we are happy to engage with both agencies as they request going forward. The Council is acutely aware of the need to be proactive and comprehensive in the prevention, management and mitigation of all potential impacts of the North West Relief Road, particularly in the light of the well-understood environmental sensitivities around the construction and future use of the scheme. We have therefore reviewed the extensive conditions as proposed by the local planning authority and can inform members of planning committee that we consider them to be robust, appropriate and deliverable. I'm just going to reflect on a couple of points raised earlier, if I may, Chair, as well, using my 8 minutes. Just for points of clarity, there was a reference to baseline species surveys. These are by definition time limited, so there is a requirement to undertake those periodically. They will be redone during the condition period. Bats were mentioned specifically. Pre-commencement surveys are a standard approach, and that does then allow review of mitigation approaches prior to commencement. Specifically, badgers were mentioned. Badger information is not put in the public domain as these are designated as protected species. We understand as applicant that the hydrogeology matters raised are deemed appropriate for treating through conditions in the eyes of the statutory consultees, the LPA and their advisors, just for clarity on that one. And I believe actually that's all we have to say at this point in time. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Matt. Mike, is there any comments you'd like to make about the speakers, what come forth before we open to the floor?
I think our view is, and obviously that there's difference of opinion here, and we've gone above and beyond what we would normally do in terms of this with engaging watermen, because clearly we've taken it seriously, this issue that have arisen, and we've got to the point where we feel confident that with the appropriate conditions we can deal with it, we can move forward with this now, and that's the LPA position, I think, on it.
Thank you, Mike. Right, the floor. Joyce, thank you.
Just a quick question. Watermen were criticised by one of the speakers. Can they respond to what the criticism was?
Certainly. Are we looking at you, Phil? Or Rob?
Yep, hi. Well, what we've done, me and Phil, is when we look at a bit of a new scheme, we're going to thoroughly review that. We're going to find any issues with it, and we'll mention them where there are. So we pick it up, and we really go through all the motions there. Overall, yeah, there are a few things to sort out, but having gone through and looked at the conditions, we're satisfied that they can be addressed at that stage. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Is that okay, Joyce? Yeah?
I was hoping for a fuller answer, but yes, that's fine.
Thank you. Julian.
Thank you, Chair. I will be moving for deferment. I just wanted to put a case really to start with. So my first point is with regard to the officer suggesting that they're entirely comfortable with the huge number of pre-commencement conditions, as if that's not an issue we really need to worry about at all. So to remind the members that the NPPF says conditions that are required to be discharged before development commences should be avoided unless there is a clear justification. The only justification we have been given by the applicant that they weren't prepared to do all of these investigations and risk assessments in the previous nearly 5 years since the application was submitted, the only justification we have now that we have to get on with this is precisely that, to avoid further delay. That is not, in my view, a sufficient justification for us to be doing something which is well beyond the normal process and to allow so many pre-commencement conditions. So my first reason for objecting to this is that I don't think the committee should be comfortable at all that we have sufficient justification to accept such a huge number of pre-commencement conditions, and I think if we do go ahead and do that, we are opening ourselves up to real risk of legal challenge. The second reason is to do with the environmental impact assessment, and so Joyce is saying that there's been a criticism of watermen. Actually, I think the criticism, frankly, is of the officer report, because the officer report is claiming that Waterman has effectively said, yes, the EIA is adequate. They certainly do not say that, and I would like to be pointed out exactly where they say that they say that the EIA is robust, anywhere in their report. We have seen in your report, the officer report, and their previous documents, paragraph after paragraph, I think it's about 54 paragraphs, where they agree with the Environment Agency that the EIA is effectively not sufficient and that therefore we need further investigations. So I think it is simply not the case, and I am not comfortable, and I don't think the committee should be comfortable, that we have an EIA which is actually robust and sufficient. And we should be clear that that's a legal requirement, that you cannot proceed with this application unless there is a robust EIA in place. And the Environment Agency don't think so, and I'm not convinced that Waterman have told us that they think so, but frankly, even if they did, they're not the Environment Agency. And so for us as a committee, we would have to be putting into the balance, when we weigh this up, the fact that on the one hand we have the Environment Agency being very clear that it's not adequate, and on the other hand we have perhaps a further consultant saying, yeah, we're nearly there, but actually here's all this huge list of reasons why actually we agree with the Environment Agency anyway. That to me does not feel like sufficient weight for us to say, yes, we're comfortable with the environment, with the EIA. So that's the second reason why I think we really have to defer this, that we do not yet have an adequate EIA. It seems absolutely clear, as the hydrologist said, that the applicant, in other words, Shropshire Council, has simply not been prepared to put in the investment, to do the investigations required to get us to the stage so that we can make a proper determination on this application. That's outrageous. They're putting the water, the courses at risk, and frankly, they're putting the council at risk legally by, frankly, it seems, pushing the planning authority to get on with it simply because they weren't prepared to do the investigations in the nearly 5 years they've had to do those investigations. I don't think that's appropriate, and I think as a committee we should be going back to the applicant and saying, do the work and then come back to us, and that we cannot put all of that into conditions at this stage. So I move for a deferment on those grounds.
Thank you, Julian. David.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to second Councillor Dean's proposal. But one of the reasons I think was made very clear today is that lots of these papers have been submitted late, and this is a very important set of conditions which governing the safety of water for people of Shrewsbury, and I don't think we should be considering papers which have been submitted so late in the day. Indeed, in the minutes of the last meeting, it made clear that all the conditions should be submitted prior to the meeting to give possibility for councillors to properly consider them. And that has not happened. And I really, you can see in the papers which have been submitted and circulated today that conditions were being discussed right up until yesterday. This is not satisfactory. We need to have a clear set of conditions which we can understand and which we can discuss and debate. And I don't think submitting papers so late in the day is appropriate, and I think therefore we should definitely defer discussion of this item until we have a proper set of conditions which are clear, which are reasonably well argued, and which we can understand. I think the way in which it's been done is particularly poor, and I'd like to recommend and second Julian's proposal that we defer this matter now.
Thank you, David. Nigel.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'm going to support that. I think from listening to what we've heard from the speakers, something sort of hit home quite strongly, in particular the aspect of the EIA not being fit for purpose. I don't think the only person that appears to me that's saying that it's fit for purpose is the local planning authority, is the applicant. It's rather like, the Rwanda statement that the government's making, somewhere is safe when it clearly bloody well isn't. Excuse me, my apologies. When it isn't safe. And I think when the issues are so important as the issue of the groundwater supply for the residents of Shrewsbury and surrounding area, that we absolutely have to have a situation where the EIA can be relied upon. And to say that we're going to deal with that by conditions is not sufficient, and I think we shouldn't be considering it under those circumstances, Chairman. My apologies for swearing. I shouldn't have done that. My apologies.
Apologies for what, sorry? No.
Apologies for saying a swear word, Chairman, which I shouldn't have done. If you didn't pick it up, my apologies.
Thank you, Nigel. Mike, I'm going to ask you, have you got any response to the questions?
There's a fundamental difference of opinion in terms of when we deal with this. I think the issues have been identified. I think Waterman's accept there are issues that have been identified, but we're all comfortable that we can deal with those via condition, whereas the EA want the information up front. And that's where it's not that there's a difference of opinion in terms of what's required, it's when that's done. I think that's the issue. And we've gone through those hurdles. We've had that discussion with the EA. They've come back. Yes, their view is they would like that information up front. That information at present isn't available. But we can deal with it via condition, and we're comfortable to be able to deal with it via condition. I think that's the issue, isn't it? It's when that information comes.
Thank you for explaining that, Mike. Tracy, would you like to say a word? Thank you.
Thank you. Just to add to that, so the point about planning conditions and the number of conditions, well, quite frankly, having dealt with lots of sort of significant applications for lots of years, this is not unusual in terms of numbers of conditions. So perhaps it's because we don't normally bring conditions back to committee. Perhaps it's unusual for you to see the number of conditions in front of you, to forensically have a look at those, which I'm sure you've wanted to do. Officers normally do those, so it's not unusual for housing estates, fairly small ones, to have 20, 30, 40 conditions in place. So this is a significant development, as we all know, and it is inevitable that we know it is in sensitive location, and therefore it is going to bring to the surface a lot of conditions that will make this development acceptable. There should not be an application refused if it cannot be dealt with, the matters cannot be dealt with by condition. And planning legislation is very clear about that. So if you have conditions in front of you that makes this development acceptable, it is not acceptable to say there's too many conditions. You have to really look at whether the conditions deal with all the matters before you. If you feel that they don't, then tell us what those additional conditions might be, and we will be able to look at imposing those additional conditions. So it's really important that before you today is to look at those conditions and see whether it covers everything. In terms of the EA and Severn Trent, well, Severn Trent are clearly in a comfortable position. They are the owner of the asset, not the Environment Agency. They are comfortable, and you can see from the emails we've shown you, but also the amount of information online, that Severn Trent are comfortable with it. The EA are the overarching body, and we want them as a statutory consultee to support this development as well. They do not feel that they're in that position where they can outwardly say we are supporting it, but that does not mean to say they are objecting. They want to work with the applicant and the local planning authority to tweak the conditions, to make sure the conditions are complied with through the life of the scheme coming forward and the development taking place. So this is going to be an iterative process with them, and you will see in the recommendation that there's an opportunity of tweaking the conditions if they come back and they want some additional wording put in. And I'm hopeful that if members are minded to support the application, then you will give that authority for us to be able to do that as well. So I think it's really important to think about the position we're in here today. This is not looking back at October the 31st, when we considered the application and the principles of the development. That's not what today is about. It is about whether these conditions before you today cover all the outstanding matters. And if they do, the committee should be minded to support the application. As far as Watermans are concerned, I think Phil wanted to come back in actually and respond. But maybe Phil might want to just sort of explain the position in terms of Watermans, that they're not raising concerns about the EIA. They are comfortable with the EIA. We are not going to get everybody running along, off into the sunset saying this is absolutely, perfect. It will never be perfect, but we will thrive towards getting it as perfect as we can, because We are the local planning authority and we will oversee that, and we'll ensure we work with the EA and Severn Trent to do so, as well as Waterman's and as well as any other body that we need to work with. So it's really important that, you know, members understand that this is the council doing this scheme, and, you know, we're the local planning authority and we will ensure that all these conditions are complied with. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Tracy. Philip, would you like to come in?
Yeah, it was really to do with the First Councillor's comment about the speakers, and just to come back on that, on specifics. One of them was raised as we put the DQRA in as a condition. It's actually, we put it in as an updated condition, so we're not saying that there's anything wrong with the existing one, but with the other works that are proposed as covered by other conditions, that might have an impact that they will want to, so we want to make sure that it is actually reconsidered as part of the DQRA, so that the whole picture is still captured within the conditions. So thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened, hopefully, quite avidly and understood the debate, and I did hear an officer of Shropshire Council actually say, we control it with appropriate conditions. Those words were said by an officer earlier on this afternoon. And if one looks at the agreed position of this committee, as agreed at the 31st of October, the actual resolved decision says that in accordance with officer recommendation, planning permission be approved subject to additional conditions, and the final wording of conditions being delegated to the Assistant Director of Economy and Place for agreement with statutory consultees prior to it being brought back to a future meeting of the committee for approval and assigned, etc., etc. Now, with appropriate conditions does not satisfy what was agreed by the committee back in October, a final wording of conditions. Is it final wording of conditions, or will we control it with appropriate conditions, which was said earlier on this afternoon? So when is final, when is appropriate, and for the committee to look at it, the decision was that we want to see the final agreed conditions, because we were told EA and others wanted some work doing and they weren't happy with it. There was a letter sent to the council in December from the EA, but the resolved decision states final wording of conditions being delegated to the officers and then brought back, final conditions brought back to the committee for their agreement. We haven't got the final conditions.
Tabitha, look at you.
Yeah, in the late items, so I'm just finding it now, the EA did actually confirm, so you've had the email from Severn Trent before that confirmed they accept the conditions, but the EA have also confirmed they have no further comments. We did ask them, said if you have any further comments, please let us know, and they said they have no further comments to make at this point. So we've asked them for any further comments on the final list of conditions, and they do not have any.
Yes, if I can, Chairman, because they've already passed comment before for it, but as I say, it says in the agreed, resolved decision of this committee, it says final wording of conditions. Have all the conditions been finally put to bed, I's dotted, T's crossed, full stops in place? Have all the conditions been agreed with all the consultees? Because the words used by an officer earlier on is that we can control it with appropriate conditions. What are the appropriate conditions that we have not before us today?
It's the list of final conditions with those updated conditions that I provided you earlier, and the authorities have seen those.
Last time, Chairman, an officer said this afternoon, within the last hour, We can control it with appropriate conditions.
Those are the appropriate conditions, and that's the advice of all the consultees that we've had.
So we've got appropriate conditions. Yeah, okay. Julian.
It feels to me like, as we were warned by Mr. Streetley, that the legal risks are ramping up as we sit here. So in regard to pre-development conditions, we are told by officers effectively, well, that's your ignorance. You know, you haven't been in this situation before. There's always loads of conditions. My point was not that. My point was not the number. My point was that the NPPF states conditions that are required to be discharged before development commences should be avoided unless there is a clear justification. We have not been given a clear justification, and in the officer's response, we didn't hear a clear justification. We've always been told is that we're comfortable, that we can do all this with conditions. That is not a clear justification for making that decision. The decision to do so, as far as I can tell, is purely based on the applicant, Shropshire Council, wanting to get on with it, despite the fact they've had 5 years to do this and they haven't done it. So I do not think we are being given a clear answer to what is the justification for taking this step of having so many pre-commencement conditions, which are going to really affect, or could potentially really affect, the actual scheme. So I'm really concerned that that's where we're being taken. Secondly, in terms of the EA response that we've had, clearly they have already said they don't think you should be doing it like this. And they're simply not saying any more because that's still their stated position, which again means we have to have an extraordinarily robust justification for doing it like this. And we don't. So on those grounds, I just think we are going down an enormously risky route.
Thank you. But Christian, you'd like to make a comment, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just wanted to address that point, it being suggested that the course is disappearing down a problematic legal area. It's paragraph 55 that you're referring to in the framework, and the second sentence of that is that which you've read out. Planning obligation should only be used where it is not possible to address unacceptable impacts through... that's planning obligations. Planning conditions should be kept to a minimum and only imposed where they are necessary, relevant to planning, and agreeing conditions early is beneficial to all parties involved in the process and can speed up decision-making. Conditions that are required to be discharged before development commences should be avoided unless there is clear justification, and also the applicant's written agreement is required there. The point being there is that a planning permission should not be withheld, as has already been stated, if it can be rendered acceptable in planning terms through the use of planning conditions. And that is what your officers have told you, that the planning conditions in this case are acceptable. Then you move on to the question of, well, I know what the subject matter of those conditions is, and I know what I want them to deal with. Should they be pre-commencement or not? The point being that if a condition doesn't need to be a pre-commencement condition, then that should be avoided. I.e., if I've got a condition that requires me to do something later in a build programme, there's no logical basis for it to be a pre-commencement condition. But where you've got issues which do need to be dealt with prior to the development commencing, then it is entirely appropriate to have pre-commencement conditions. The justification is the fact that the subject matter of those conditions is such that it needs to be discharged before the development commences. And in terms of reasons, of course, the schedule of conditions that you have does have reasons attached to them. So, in short, there is justification for them being pre-commencement conditions.
Just to respond very quickly, yes. So which would be fine if it wasn't for the fact that you've got a major consultee saying these are not appropriate for pre-commencement conditions. So all of that was predicated on the idea that this is entirely appropriate as pre-commencement conditions, and that's what's being challenged by the EA, and that's what makes it, I think, the justification unreasonable. You know, we don't have sufficient justification.
I would suggest, just with respect, that's to conflate two matters. I was setting out what is the appropriateness or not of a pre-commencement condition. Obviously, the decision maker, which is not me, I deal simply with legal matters, has to take into account all representations. And the EAA are a statutory consultee, and they've said what they've said. It's been reported to you. But ultimately, this is not their decision. It's your decision, factoring in all the advice that you've been given.
Thank you, Christian. Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I just follow on for that? On conditions, are we able to prioritise them? Are we able, if we were minded to accept this, are we able to actually control which conditions we look at first or not? Because I'm just worried that the main focus seems to be on the effect on the water. I just wondered if we could actually do that condition first.
I would have thought so.
I think the point is that they're pre-commencement, so you can't do any works before you get those agreed. So nothing can happen, essentially, until those are agreed. So it wouldn't matter what order that they have to get all of those determined before they do anything. So they can't start building the road until that is agreed.
You. And can you put my mind at rest? You have actually done a risk assessment, a detailed quantitative risk assessment. I've read those 4 words in the note. But
there has been a DQRA, and as Waterman stated before, it's just to make sure that once all the other matters are being looked at, that is also up to date and still relevant, that when details are being discharged, it hasn't impacted that, but it is still correct.
Thank you very much.
I don't think we're all going to agree at all at the same time, but I think we've got a proposal and a second on the table. So I think we ought to go for a vote roll call. Is that okay, Miranda? Yeah, by all means.
It's a live meeting.
Yeah. Is that okay?
Yes, Chair?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So you've heard the proposal, which has also been seconded, which is to defer this matter for all the reasons given about the concern for conditions. I think that we've heard in some detail. So I will call your name, and if you can tell me if you are for, against or abstain. So Councillor Aldcroft.
Against.
Councillor Barrow.
Against.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Dean.
For.
Councillor Elner.
Against.
Councillor Evans.
Against.
So that's Councillor David Evans, apologies. Councillor Roger Evans.
For.
Councillor Hartin.
For.
Councillor Hunt.
Against.
Councillor Vasmer.
For.
Councillor Wynne.
Against.
Chair, that is 6 against and 5 for, so that has not been carried.
Okay, thank you. So, do we have any other proposals going forward? Thank you, David.
Okay. I've listened to the debate, I've listened to Waterman, and I'm sure with a bit of tweaking, this can go forward. So I'm happy to recommend to committee that we accept the officer's report, that we allow this planned application to go forward with the following recommendation. And the following recommendation is that the planning conditions set out in Appendix 1 attached to the report be agreed by North Planning Committee subject to minor amendments, being delegated to the Assistant Director of Economy and Place. The conditions will be attached to any subsequent decision issued by the local planning authority. Following the completion of the Section 106 agreement between the council and the landowners, impact and mitigation and compensation strategy proposals, and therefore I recommend this approved.
Thank you, David. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Roy. Okay, can we go? ahead with this. Sorry, Joyce, would you like to speak?
I just wanted to say that I was undecided until I heard Tracy Dark speak and the legal advisor, Christian Hawley. I think a good argument was made, but I think I was swayed by them. Thank you.
I must admit they both spoke very well. Thank you.
Very good.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Through you, Chair, we have the proposal and the seconder, and that proposal has been as per the recommendation set out on page 2 of the report today. However, you have heard from the officers that you've had before you today the conditions, so the conditions set out in that recommendation are referred to in Appendix 1 to that report. But there have been amendments shown to you today in terms of the final version of the conditions, so that you've had certain amendments recommended by Severn Trent, by the ecologist, by the arboriculturalist and so forth, as Tabitha went through with you at the beginning of the meeting. So can we just be clear that is the proposal the recommendation, but the conditions not just as they were in Appendix 1, but as have been placed before you today?
That's correct, yes.
Is that okay?
Yes. Yep.
Yes. Right, Roy?
Yes.
Okay.
That is, okay. Does the officers, is that everything?
Everything over there? Yeah. Yeah.
So you wish me to put this to the vote, Chair?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. So through you then, the vote is, as you've heard, as that amended proposal we've just agreed.
Correct.
So I will go through the names again. Councillor Aldcroft.
For.
Councillor Barrow.
For.
Councillor Clark.
Against?
Councillor Dean.
Against?
Councillor Elner.
For.
Councillor David Evans.
For.
Councillor Roger Evans.
Against.
Councillor Harton.
Against.
Councillor Hunt.
For.
Councillor Vasmer.
Against.
Councillor Wynne.
For.
Chair, that is 6 for and 5 against, so that has been carried.
Switching one on again. So that's gone through with the officer's recommendation. It's been passed. So, and I've lost where we are. Somewhere. Okay, so that concludes. I'd like to thank all the committee and all the officers for their time and hard work being put into this. It's been a long job. I'd like to thank everybody for their time. And yeah, so the date for the next meeting is somewhere, the 5th of March, Shrewsbury Room, Shirehall, 2 p.m. Thank you very much, everybody.